Hi, my name is Leslie with Cylon Rolling Acres. I run a grass-based meat goat farm in western Wisconsin where I raise our meat goats all on pasture, and I recently started a new live Q&A series that's based on Instagram, but I wanted to record my replays and share them here on my YouTube channel. And so I just want to give you a heads up that this first episode is going to be in vertical format, so you'll see it that way in just a few minutes after I tack it on after this video. And then in the future, I am going to work on recording it horizontally so it's a little bit easier for those of you who will watch the replay here on YouTube. So enjoy. And if you have questions, I will include information below in the show notes, a little bit more about how to submit questions. Enjoy. Good morning. I hope you're all doing well. My name is Leslie Sacchina, and I am I'm a farmer in western Wisconsin, and I run, it's called Cylon Rolling Acres. We're a grass-based meat goat farm, so we have a fairly decent size herd of meat goats, about 70 head, and we also have a small flock of sheep too that we're continuing to add to that. And so this morning I am going to start my first I know some of you are going to just start coming on, so I just want to kind of give a little bit of background on my live Q&As that I'm going to start doing. And part of the reason I decided to start doing these live Q&As, right now we're going to do them on a weekly basis. We'll see how they go, and how life managing on the farm, and my kids are going to be home soon for the summer, so we'll see how things go. But part of the reason I decided to start doing the live Q&A as over the years, as I've started raising meat goats, we've been farming for about 10 years now. If you're, no matter probably what stage you're at with raising goats, or if you're thinking about it, you've learned pretty fast that there's not a lot of resources out there for raising goats. When I find them, I'm very grateful for them, but it's in bits and pieces, and it just really makes things challenging as a livestock owner to be able to manage your herd when you're working off of information that hasn't been really researched or tested a lot. So you go off of a lot of experience and what you can find. And so what my approach over the years, and this has come in with on the farming side of things, as well as the marketing and meat, like the actual meat side of things with goats, and even grazing for our operation, is my approach has really been learning by doing, learning from others, and then taking the research and best practices and what I can find from university studies and even industry studies, and pull that in together and kind of have that influence my approach to how I farm. And it's kind of a continual process of how I fine tune how I farm. And so that is my approach, just to give you a background. For me, it's really important to know what's out there and what's working for others as well, to really fine tune what I'm doing. So part of the reason why I'm sharing, and not just here, but like on my Instagram handle, Cylon Rolling Acres, our farm site, and then Grazing with Leslie is kind of our more education focused, really for farmers, and not just outward education even for our consumers, is because it took a lot to get here to where I am at today, and I want to share that with others, so that way you can start over here and not right here where I did. And that's going to be so a little bit about and that's true, like I said, on the farming side, on the marketing retail side of things, and even the grazing. So a little bit more about our farm. We have a Boer Kiko cross herd of goats. We're about somewhere around 70 head of breeding animals. If you raise goats, they often have twins, so like those numbers jump considerably. We're continuing to grow our herd. Again, small flock of Texel sheep. We run them together, and our end market is we direct market everything from our farm. And so direct marketing, I kind of classify that as end to consumer. So we have an on-site. We sell everything from our farm through our website. It's all federally inspected meat. It goes families can order their meat from us by the cut or in bundles. We offer whole goat a little bit occasionally through our farm club program, and it's available for local pickup. So in Western Wisconsin, our big market outside of Western Wisconsin, which is pretty strong as well, is also the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. So we're about an hour from that area. And then from there, we have a nationwide shipping program, and actually most of our product covers more the upper Midwest, but we do have customers throughout the United States. We do a little bit of wholesale marketing to restaurants and some food co-ops in Western Wisconsin and Minneapolis, St. Paul market area, but really the core of our business is direct to consumer. And so the other thing that is a little bit unique for us, I know we're not the only ones, but it seems like it's, especially in our area, a little less common, is that we rotationally graze our goats. So because we're in Wisconsin, we do get snow and pretty cold weather, we do raise our goats, or they do have access to the barn and hay in the wintertime, but when thankfully, like right now, it's nice out, and once things start to green up after winter, our goats are out on pasture. We're practicing regenerative grazing practices where we're moving them 1 to 2 days at a time to new sections of our pasture called paddocks. And so that's been a really core piece of how we farm, and probably sometimes I think I'm more of a grazer than I am even a goat farmer. It's just kind of the mentality and approach of how I do things. So I wanted to share that as I get into things because it gives you perspective of where I'm at and where my education and my training and my real life experience come into play. So today, so how I'll be doing the Q&A is if you have questions, you can submit them to me. You can do them definitely live. You don't have to do them live because I know not everybody's going to be up early in the morning. If you can join me, that's awesome. But you can submit them by just sending me a direct message on Instagram through this account, Grazing with Leslie, or through my farm account, Skyline Rolling Acres. I also have, if you go to this Grazing with Leslie account, on my highlights, a tab on live Q&A, and there is a link to a form where you can submit the question. And if you do that, I can also then email you once your question's been answered. So today's focus is really going to be on resources for raising goats and even grazing as well. So I'm just looking at my notes because I'm a detail person, but I always have a lot going on, so I like to make sure I don't miss something. So again, that's just me. So a few things that I'll be sharing. Now on the resources, we'll talk about a little bit more about, I'm going to share some resources on just raising goats in general, grazing, and then on the retail meat side. So when it comes to general goat raising resources, one of the books that I am a big advocate for is this holistic goat care book. It's by a I'm sorry, I'm not even going to try to pronounce her first name. I've heard her speak, but Caldwell. I'll hold it up there. Gianaclis. I'll give it my best shot. I apologize. I have a mouthful of a last name, so I understand. But this holistic goat care book, I really appreciate, because it's a nice mix of, I'd call it kind of an overarching guide on how the goat works, overview on health concerns, management practices. But I really like Caldwell's approach in the book because it's a mix of using traditional medicine and also holistic preventative practices. And for how we raise our goats from a grazing perspective, holistic is really, from a preventative approach, in a preventative manner, is really important to us. If we can prevent issues from coming up, I think that's great. But there are times when we're caring for animals that we do need to use traditional medicine. And so I really appreciate that approach. This is a great guide for troubleshooting issues. Google can be a really crazy place when it comes to searching for resources on goats, especially when it comes to healthcare. I will put this disclaimer out, I am not a veterinarian. I have taken some animal science courses in college. So I appreciate having this resource. In addition to this, obviously I use my veterinarian as well. And yeah, So I highly recommend this book. There's also a few things that I really appreciate with it as well that are in here, besides like some of the general knowledge on different health issues. There is a lot of great illustrations and resources on kidding and presentation of kids during the birthing process. Sometimes that can be good as just a refresher, and also if you're running into challenges of how to assist. There's fecal sample guidance. Also, if you are unfortunately run into some challenges with an animal and they pass, and you're interested in learning more about maybe what happened aside from the outside observations, she also walks you through how to do necropsy. And so you can work with a veterinarian to do that, but she also has a guidance here, and you can really learn a lot. Even though you lose an animal, it's not easy, but when we've worked with our veterinarian, when we've had some challenges, especially early on, we've worked with a veterinarian to do some necropsies over time, and it's helped because there's things you can't see that are going on inside the animal's body, and it can help you. While it's tough to do one or even watch one happen, it can really help you be a better manager of your herd going forward, and know and see what kind of issues might be underlying that you can see from inside the animal. So that's the Holistic Goat Care book. The next piece I wanted to share is this Meat Goat Handbook. I'm reading everything backwards on my thing on here. Meat Goat Production Handbook. This is from the University of Langston, and it's, Langston University, and they have they have the American Institute for Goat Research, and this handbook is pretty large and lengthy. What I like about it is a compilation of just about every university research article, or I would call it maybe extension research article. So it might not be as comprehensive as a scholarly article, but it's still based on, I would say, scientific practices in writing that has probably been out there related to meat goats. You can find you can find this on their website to order, or you can find PDFs to pull off of. The one thing is that because it's lots of different articles in one document, it's very piecemeal, but it's very educational. So, the topics, the section on pastures for goats may not necessarily, it's written by a lot of different people. So I kind of put that out there, but it's a great resource that looks at all topics related to the production side of meat goats. So this has been a great resource. The Langston University also has an online education class that's related to this. It is very comprehensive education-wise. I haven't looked at it recently, but in the past when I've looked at it, it's got a lot of great information, but it's a little dry in its delivery, just heads up. But if you're looking for some detailed information, it's a good place to go. Let's see here. So the other place, I'm going to flip my computer around, that has been my go-to, and especially since we manage our goats on pasture, is wormex.com. And so this website, if you haven't visited, I would highly recommend checking it out, even get on their email list. And so it's the American Consortium for Small Ruminant Parasite Control. And so it's a network of university professionals that have experience or specialize in small ruminants, especially, and are familiar with parasite management. And whether your animals are raised on pasture or they're not, you probably will experience some type of parasite management challenges, or figure out a way, or have to incorporate how you manage parasites into your practice of raising goats. And so this resource is really great. A few things I really like about it. There's a lot of great articles on there about best practices and on research. We've changed our approach over the years on how we manage parasites from a medication standpoint based on the research here. There's also research related to practices related to pasture management and how you can try to prevent parasite challenges. There also is, they have a sheet, a printable sheet on here for all small ruminants. So if you think like sheep and goats, camelids, llamas, things along those lines, that has a guide for dewormer practices, and it's based on research that they've seen of what is actually effective, not necessarily maybe what's on the label. Again, I'm not giving out veterinarian advice, but that resource is really helpful in making sure you're effective in how you manage your any parasite challenges. So I really highly recommend being familiar with the resources there, if you haven't heard of them before too. So I'm going to move on to grazing resources. So one of the books that I am just getting into that I got this summer in January at the Grassworks Grazing Conference, it's our major or statewide grazing conference in Wisconsin, is this Managing Pastures book from Dale Strickler. Dale was a keynote speaker and did several workshops while he was at the conference. I also had a opportunity to review his Managing Water book that he put out probably about 4 or 5 years ago for Moses, and he just does a great job of writing and explaining a topic in a very palatable and easy to digest a process, which is great, especially when you're farming, you're doing all the things, so you don't always have the time to sit down and read complex issues or complex topics. But this has been a really great guide so far, and I've appreciated it. I'm not all the way through it yet, but I'm in the process of continuing to review this from the perspective of grazing management. The other guide that I have found to be incredibly useful, and this was one that I've used a lot as I got started, and when I great Rotational Grazing, our grazing specialist through NRCS had recommended I use this, and when I attended our University of Wisconsin Grazers School a long time ago, this was part of our training program, as well as in the classroom and online learning, is this Pastures for Profit, a guide for rotational grazing. And so this article / mini guidebook, it's not this big, but I got it when it's part of a larger book, but it is published by the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and it is really a great comprehensive guide for getting started practicing rotational grazing, the concept of paddock moves, right sizing your paddocks, the principles of taking half, leaving half, different types of pasture species and so forth. Obviously, it's focused on upper Midwest, but I think the concepts can be really applied elsewhere. This is still, last I looked in the last year, I believe it's still available for download. All these resources afterwards, I will link them either in the comments here or I'll put it on my blog. I know sometimes on Instagram you can't link everything, so I will make sure that it's available. But this has been a great guide on just the nuts and bolts of grazing itself. Let's see here. So a couple things that aren't books per se is, depending on where you are at, I would highly recommend looking to see if you can find out if your state has a grazing network or state grazing organization. Depending on where you're located, it might be called something a little bit different. I know out west it tends to be more range focused, and the title for that may be a little bit different, but our state grazing organization is Grassworks. In fact, we have a lot of people who are involved with Grassworks that are from Minnesota and Illinois, our bordering states, just because they recognize the value, how valuable that organization is. So that they have an annual conference that's just tremendous. It's one of my favorite conferences to go to each year. In learning about grazing practices, there's usually something on small ruminants, not a lot, but I've kind of got to the mindset of looking at practices and then thinking about how can you apply it to our situation and with goats. And then related to that, there's also in Wisconsin, we have grazing networks. And again, this may look a little bit different, but we have what it's called pasture walks. And so they're basically like field days out on different grazing operations where you do, basically it's a tour, you walk through the farm. It's hosted by the grazer, usually some type of educators along with, and they talk about either it's kind of a show and tell of what they've been doing or talking about a specialized practice within their grazing. And it's been just a great way to network and meet other grazers, but also look at other practices and approaches to grazing. And I've learned a lot on how I can continue to grow and improve as a grazer on my farm. The Stockman Grass Farmer, this is a little bit older issue, is just what I grabbed off my desk here. This is from March, but this is also one of my favorite publications as well, that is focused on grass farming and all things grazing. Let's see here. And then if you're looking for just some other resources, my education site, Grazing with Leslie, I have a pretty comprehensive blog on a variety of topics related to grazing with goats, raising goats and marketing as well, but it's kind of related to the grazing topic. So if you check that out, you can find a lot of information there. A lot of it is based on either what we're doing or things that I've learned that I wanted to share. And then I also just wanted, this is kind of a fitting place for it, I also just recently created a free fence training guide, and that electric fence training guide for goats, and so that resource is on my website as well. Before we go out to graze every season, we will we always need to retrain our goats or train the younger goats on how to respect the electric fence. It just makes everything smoother when it comes time to grazing. We don't need to worry about animals getting out or sneaking out. And so I had questions on how we manage to do that, and so that resource, you can find that on our website as well too. And the last section of resources I wanted to share today that I find valuable is on the meat retail side of things. So as I mentioned, we direct market all of our goat meat, and so we are working most of the time with a few exceptions of a couple of our wholesale customers, we work directly with our processor, our butcher, to do all the cuts and packaging of our meat. And from that, I've learned a lot about goat meat. In itself, I'm still learning a lot, but there's, it's, from the meat quality side of things to the cooking and consuming it. This is another area that, because compared to like other areas of animal agriculture, we don't have a research and promotion board like you might have, like they have with beef, with lamb. And so there really isn't a lot of consumer and even producer education when it comes to, or even major standards related to quality of meat goat and cuts. A lot of it is compared to lamb, which is okay, but it's still very different. So I've learned a lot over the years, and so a few of the resources I've used just to share is this butchering book by Adam Danforth. It's a really great guide. If you're interested in doing on-farm butchering yourself, of course, if you do that, it's for your own consumption. You just know you can't sell meat that you harvest yourself. That's just for personal use. But he walks through the process of doing the harvest, and then he also has a pretty comprehensive section, I'll just show this piece, on cuts of meat. And so this book has been tremendous for me in having a better understanding of where all the cuts come from, what certain parts of the goat can be, if you get steaks, you can't get a roast, or if I have special requests on having a leg of goat that is more dramatic looking, so you leave the shank on. It's been really helpful for me to work, not only as education for me as a farmer, but also if I'm working with some of my wholesale customers to understand what their request is and be able to communicate it to my butcher. There's times where I actually just take photos, screen captures of these illustrations and share it. So this is just a great resource. It covers other species, and in fact, he has a whole nother book just focused on beef. So if you raise other livestock, I highly recommend it. It's even if you never do the harvest yourself, it's just a great reference guide for understanding the cuts of meat as well. And then a few cooking related books. There's, again, as you probably know, there's not a lot out there, but James Wetler, he is a James Beard Award winner, and actually so is Adam Danforth. I'll give him credit where credit is due as well. But this book is awesome. It is just like, it's super thick. It's all, there's a little bit of content in the front, but it's all recipes related to goat meat. James was a trained chef in the UK, and also has a goat meat business called Cabrito, where he sells and markets goats, but he's kind of unique perspective because he has that chef background. But this book, he also has helped manage the Goattober campaign, that is all things goat meat in October. But I'd highly recommend this book. It's a great resource for cooking and eating and enjoying goat meat. Goat Meat, Milk, and Cheese. This is a newer book that I've acquired for my collection by Bruce Weinstein and Mark Scarborough. Also, it's not as comprehensive because they kind of touch on all things goat product, but it's still a fun read and some fun recipes as well. And then the last thing I'll note too, related to kind of on the meat side of things, is I also have a ebook that I published last fall called the Meat Goat Primer, and it is a guide to all things goat meat, the meat side of things, the retail side of things for farmers who are raising meat goats. And so it was really designed to be to help farmers or folks who want to raise meat goats have an understanding of that area, just because there's not a lot of information out there. And also, if you're wanting to go beyond just selling the livestock market, it gives you a little bit more perspective on working with a butcher and things to expect along the way. And so that is also available on my website, Grazing with Leslie, as well. So I know there's more resources out there, but I thought that would be a great place to start for, and I had a question on it too, on some of my favorite resources for raising goats and grazing. So those are the resources that I wanted to share with you today. And so if you're interested, you can find more information on my website at grazingwithleslie.com. I have a Grazing Goats community, which is my email list, and on that email list, I will send out the replay for this. So if you caught it this time on Instagram or on my list, know that I will send the replay out to that list every week as well. So that way you don't have to remember to go hunt it down and find it. And if you're interested in submitting questions in the future, you can comment below here. I can grab them for future episodes. Otherwise, I do have the Q&A form on my website, and also on the highlights section of my Grazing with Leslie Instagram handle. And I'll include links to, actually I probably do it as a blog post that I'll link in here in the comments about the resources I mentioned as well. So thank you, and I will see you next Wednesday morning at 6:30 or whenever it's convenient for you to watch. Have a great day.